Carolyn Aaron stars in the fourth season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. Carolyn, it's such a pleasure to talk with you today.
Thank you.
I want to start with your long and storied career. I mean, you've worked with so many incredible writers and directors like Nora Ephron and Mike Nichols. So I wanted to start by asking, based on everything you've done in the past, what is so unique and special about working with Amy Sherman Palladino and Dan Palladino, who have such a distinctive style and voice?
Well, as you said, I've been really lucky to work with auteurs in the film industry, single vision artists that, become icons. But, television, at least in my experience, by nature is an art form that involves a committee. And I feel like Amy and Dan are television auteurs. And I don't know how many of those we really have, because you're usually serving so many masters in television that, I'll tell you a funny story. I had auditioned for something years ago for a new series, and my agents called me up and said, "You're their first choice. The bad news is this time they're going with their second choice." And really it was, the truth of the matter is, if you have a disparate group of people who are making a decision, not everybody's going to have the same first choice. So everybody has to throw out their first choice and go to their second choice or third choice. So we, as the audience, a lot of times are not seeing anyone's first choice. Do you know? In this case, every single thing you see, down to the napkins at the table, are Amy and Dan's choice. And I think that's part of what makes it so special, is their vision is being represented in all departments of this series.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. This is the first time I think Gold Derby is speaking with you. So I wanted to ask you, before we dive into season 4 specifically, what was your very first impression of the character when you read, the first scripts that you received? And how do you think Shirley has changed over the course of the 4 seasons so far?
Well, I didn't get to read it first. Amy got in touch with me first, via my agents, and she's starting to describe the character a little bit, the Weissmans versus the Maisels, who these parents would be and where they would fit in. And not only was it within her story that she was describing it, I think based on an aunt of hers, she was pulling some inspiration, but also based on the Jewish population in New York as it evolved, and that the Maisels are much closer to the shtetl than the Weissmans. They are first generation in a sense, and their assimilation is not quite as cooked, in a way that they are, that I really believe that Shirley still has her feet in both worlds, the way she cooks, her relationship to life. And, she's the mentally delighted. She just loves everything around her and really cherishes life. And I think that is, part of the immigrant experience that unfortunately maybe disappears over time, but she's still in that state of, I'm part of the new land. And that's exciting.
Absolutely. Speaking of the kind of Weissmans and the Maisels and their tension, so many of your scenes in the 4th season are these big ensemble scenes where, the entire cast or the main cast is working together, which I have to imagine is so joyous. I mean, it certainly jumps off the screen. Can you talk about, just the fun of doing those scenes, but also the work of getting that pacing right? Because, the Palladinos dialogue is, very dense, moves very fast, and is so rapid fire, but it works so, when it works like it does in Maisel, it works so beautifully.
Well, I'll tell you that we all love it when we're together. And the thing about it is, everyone says this, but in this case, it's honestly really true. There's real chemistry among these actors. First of all, when you're going to play this game and you get to play with people at that level, it always improves you in a sense. And so that is really part of the joy, is everyone is so talented, really talented. I told Rachel after the first season, usually when you do television, the person at the center might not be so good, and they surround them by good actors to keep them in the air. And I said, you're 26 years old and I'm working my way up to you. That's how I feel about her. I really do. When we all get together, people often ask, are we improvising? And I don't know if you know, but with the Sherman Palladinos, you don't change a comma. You don't change anything. You have to be letter perfect. And so what happens is, when we have those rapid fire overlapping scenes and there's so many people involved, we can rehearse a shot for half a day before you even shoot it, because it's like choreography in a sense. The camera is moving and you're moving, and then you still want to ground it in the truth of what's happening at the moment around the table or among each other. I think in season 4, it was the good part of the pandemic, certainly for me and my character. Once that there was not the same kind of mobility for any TV shows. If you remember, season 3 started out with a USO tour with 800 extras. Well, now we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, and there's no way they're going to let any TV show have that many people gathered together. It's just too risky. So they, took an obstacle and made it an opportunity and wrote all of these scenes where we would all be gathered together. It is a long day, very long. The hours can be very, very long, particularly with Amy, who likes to do what we call oneers, where the camera never stops. It is like in real life where the action continues, the conversation continues. It's not broken up into chunks. So you have to know your lines really, really well. And you don't want to be the person when there's so much going on that goes, I forgot what I'm going to say. You just don't want to be that person. So we tend to gather and drill each other. And it's just the combination of the people I get to play with and the writing that is there. You can hardly lose, is what I'm saying.
So much of what you're talking about ties into my next question, which is about shooting at Coney Island in that first episode. Number one, during a pandemic, to have that kind of free reign for the Maisel cast and crew, with, I imagine, a lot of extras.
Yeah.
And then second, also another one of those kind of oneer shots where, the cast is roaming around Coney Island and you're following different characters as they, walk around. So can you just talk about the incredible experience of doing that during the pandemic?
Well, first of all, we were, as everyone was, told we were going back to work on this date, postponed 3 months, postponed 6 months. Our start date just kept being moved around. And so I was speculating, I'm going, and I knew a lot of people who were on TV shows, they'd open, they'd close, they'd have an outbreak. And so we didn't start until January, after it was going to be September, November, before the holidays, after the holidays. And I kept thinking to myself, well, the show is going to be, talking heads in a kitchen. That's the safest thing to do. And we get the first script, and I went, only the Palandinos during a worldwide epidemic would start the season with a huge scene at Coney Island. I thought, how are they going to do this? So it was very interesting. They took a sound stage and they taped off that long cross where there's so much going on with the Ferris wheel. And we had a long rehearsal of where everybody would be, when the kids would come up, when I would give them ice cream, how Tony would come up behind them, all of that. And Amy was just watching. She was just watching people moving in and out, like, what would it be? What would it be? That was in January. Then we were told we would be shooting in June. They wanted to wait until the weather was warm. Coney Island was still not open. The other thing that they did for the Wonder Wheel was, these brilliant people in production that we're surrounded by, they made the exact car of the Wonder Wheel. And one by one, we sat in the car on a soundstage with our fellow actors around us. And they would feed us the dialogue, and we would do our dialogue as if we were on it. Then they built this giant platform, and I'm like, a little scared of heights, where you climbed up the back of this platform and you had to be way, way up so that if you were talking down, they could get that. They recorded all of that, and somehow someone put it all together. The day we were at Coney Island, imagine being at Coney Island and no one's there. It was so great. It was no crowds. It was a beautiful setting. It hadn't yet opened yet, and we had our free reign of it. And it was so fun. So fun.
I can imagine. And it's so cinematic. I mean, it's such a beautiful.
Isn't it unbelievable? I just could not believe it as everybody's walking through and stuff like that. And then they told us that we could have Nathan's hot dogs, which was open. That was like, if you don't want to go to the caterer, we will all buy you a Nathan's hot dog. So that was the big bonus.
That's great. Another part of your arc this season is Shirley trying to set Joel up repeatedly in some hysterical circumstances. I wanted to ask you, from your perspective as the character, how do you feel about Joel and Midge's relationship as it's been evolving over the course of the series? Obviously, she doesn't see them as together anymore, even though she doesn't know about Joel's new girlfriend yet.
Not yet.
And what do you think makes a good match for what do you think would make a good match for Joel as Shirley?
Well, I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, Shirley wants him to be happy. I really do. I think in season 2, I said to him, I want you to move on. And listen, my first choice would be them. My first choice would be for them to be together. But I think that, we go on the arc 2 by 2, and Shirley is sort of like, it doesn't so much matter what your taste is. Ultimately, it's like if any of us were stranded on a desert island and there was one other person there, they would become the love of our life. Do you know what I mean? Because I think our natural primal instinct is to attach. I think that what Shirley thinks is a good match for Joel is someone who will adore him as I do. And I think it's important to her that he's Jewish, that she's Jewish. But beyond that, I think that if it was somebody that was not Jewish, people say, what do you think Shirley's going to think when she meets this woman? And I think that, at the end of the day, her love for her child and wanting him to be attached will overrule any of her prescriptions for his own personal happiness. I think so. I mean, I just can't imagine it any other way. I have a friend in New York whose parents are an arranged marriage. She's Muslim, and every year, she has to sit with her parents and see the parade of men going by. And she said to me, I go through the ritual. I do exactly what I'm supposed to do. That's not what I'm going to do. She said, but my parents have been married very happily for 45 years. I think at the end of the day, Shirley thinks good people will make other good people happy.
Well, Shirley already seems to like May, even though she doesn't know May's,
really know where. Yes, exactly. But she's a mahjong player, and she's willing to gamble with me. So if somebody will place a bet on the table and play my game, they had to teach me mahjong twice. It's really hard. It's a hard game. I can't believe it. And it seems to be having a little bit of a renaissance in New York, where young people are getting together in groups and starting to play mahjong. And the tiles are so beautiful. They're just beautiful.
Speaking of beautiful, I wanted to ask you about Shirley's costumes, which are always so colorful and have such rich patterns. What kind of input do you have in the costumes, if any, and how does it help you find the character when you put on, that wardrobe?
Those clothes? Well, I have said to Donna, our genius costume director, when we're having a fitting or something, Shirley is gift wrapped to the nines. It's not just a bracelet. It has to be a bracelet, a pin, a necklace, and rings at all times. But I think of that as part of her celebratory nature. But, I was doing some looping for one of the hospital scene in season 4, and I was sitting on a couch. I was sitting on a chair between Maren, the other mom, and Rachel, who plays our heroine. And I went, I don't remember that love seat being there. And it was me, because every single piece of clothing I wear feels like it's like upholstery fabric. And I'm sitting inside the 2 thinnest women that God ever put on the earth. I go, oh my God, I look like a love seat compared to the 2 of you. I can't believe it. I love Shirley's clothes. That hat that Donna made for Coney Island was just wonderful. And it's, I can't believe women were dressed like this all the time. And we not only have on the clothes, we have on the underwear, which is really punishing, may I just say. And sometimes I'll go and I'll go, do I have to put on the girdle today? Because I think they go, it changes the way the clothes hang, the bra, the girdle, the slips, the stockings, the garters, all of it. And, authenticity is very important to every single department on this show.
No question. Speaking of Maren, one of the kind of comments running through Shirley's arc also this season is that how much she misses the Weissmans living in the Maisel home. So I just wanted to ask you about working with Maren and Tony and the kind of great chemistry you and Kevin have as the 4 kind of parents on the series, just working with them. And what do you think Shirley misses about having them in the house?
Well, it's so funny that you asked that. Nobody's ever asked me that, because when we first got the scripts that the Weissmans were moving in with us, there was lots and lots of text about how they felt about us, how aggravated we were, how they just couldn't wait to get out. And we started shooting it. And I said to Amy, there's so much text about how they feel about being here. How do we feel about having them? And she went, you don't have any feelings about it. They're family. And the minute she said that, I got it. I just got it. And I think I really miss having them. And I mean, who would have thought that? I mean, I think Shirley is an open door policy person, especially when it comes to family. I mean, you think about, if you put it into the immigrant experience, the open door of any family that comes, all who are hungry come and eat is sort of Shirley's motto. And then they leave and it feels a little empty. I have a history with Kevin, so it was a reunion to be with him because we did a movie years ago together and had a blast called House Arrest. And Tony, I've known for 35 years. Tony and I lived around the corner from LA. He moved to New York to do this series. I didn't know what it was because he was always working. And then very shortly after that, I got this phone call after the pilot that Amy wanted to add these characters. And I came to New York. So it's such a head start when you have a relationship with another actor. It happens or it doesn't happen. Marin was new to me, and I'm just in love with her. We just adore each other. And every time you work, you're all very close for that period of time, and you think to yourself, I wonder who's going to stick. It's unfortunate, but it is like soap bubbles. It disappears when the project disappears. Marin will stick. Marin and I will stick.
That's lovely. Let's talk about a scene you have with Tony this season that is so extraordinary, which is in that finale when the Weissmans welcome Shirley into their home for the night because your husband is in the hospital and unconscious. You have such a beautiful scene and monologue, and you do it so it's so stellar, where you're kind of talking about your relationship with him and asking Abe Weissman, what are you going to do if Rose goes first? It's a very moving scene, but also very funny. So I wanted to ask you about, that kind of tightrope, finding the balance in that scene. And also, what are your feelings about Casablanca? Because we know Shirley has some interesting opinions on the film.
I think it's, Luke Kirby, who plays brilliantly Arlennie Bruce. Luke emailed me after the season came out, and we were having a mutual admiration society for each other's work. And I said, when you get to compare Death to Casablanca, how do you get to lose? You know what I mean? It's just so extraordinary. I think that the balance, it's, first of all, I was taught by one of the greats, which was Mike Nichols. And every time Mike directed a comedy, he directed it as a tragedy. And every time he directed a tragedy, he directed it as a comedy. Because, life is marbled. We don't live life in categories. This is my comic day. This is my tragic day. We're always living both side by side. So I think that is one of the tricks of even doing this material is to ground it. It's that rich, where it is very hilarious when I read it, but it's also so heartbreaking. She will be shipwrecked, her Moishe is like a limb, and the idea of it being cut off would be so difficult. She will survive. That's what she's been taught to do. And she will help other people survive who have to go through this. One of the things that made that scene so easy is being close to Tony. I really meant it. We know each other's spouses. We've been friends for a really long time. And I would be the first one with a pot of soup at his door. God forbid it should happen. Yeah. So I got to have that for free. You don't always get that, but I got to this time.
Well, it really translates. It is such a remarkable scene, and really, is one of the kind of great moments of the finale of the season. Before I let you go, I do want to ask you if you can tease anything about the fifth and final season.
I only know a little bit more than you because they never tell us in advance. We never know where our characters are going. I don't know if they're withholding it deliberately or they don't know. I think part of when people talk about the way the characters evolve, I think also Amy and Dan are such artists that without our even knowing it, they're having a dialogue with us as actors, where our strengths, where they feel our particular hearts live inside of us. And they kind of write to that after a while. We've just started this season. I'm as curious as you are about how they're going to land this plane, because first of all, I don't want it to land. We want to stay in the air. We're going to be very sad. This doesn't come around very often. I've been at this rodeo for a long time, and I've done lots of things, and I've been grateful for lots of things, but this is a special one, and we kind of all know it. So it's going to be really hard to say goodbye. The only thing that I can tease for you about this season is that Shirley is going to be even more interfaced with Joel's life, part of his club. And, Midge is not going to give up. She is going to pick herself up and dust herself off and anybody who is in a creative field, you get to those crossroads and you go, am I going to go all in or am I going to get out? She's going to go all in.
Carolyn, Aaron, congratulations on the 4th season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Thanks so much for talking to Gold Derby today.
Thank you so much.